Hello and welcome to the Madecast, the official podcast of the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment, a series of lectures on video game history as part of the Made's ongoing effort to preserve history through teaching and displaying playable exhibits of rare games and consoles.
While life in the time of COVID has forced us to close our doors, the support of people like you has allowed us to continue to bring history to you through lectures and interviews like the one you'll hear in a few minutes. I'm Chun.
I'm Red.
I'm Anthony.
And I'm Miles.
This week, Alex catches up with Jeff Green, another veteran of the games journalism industry, to talk about his history in the magazine industry, his introduction to computer gaming world, his column Greenspeak, and much more. But first, let's get on with some news.
A little bit of news to get into. Nothing crazy coming on, but a cool little new trick discovered over the weekend by Twitch streamer Boba is Metal Gear Solid has a new speedrun trick. When you're going up the spooky staircase, you eventually can get clipped through the door without unlocking it, and thus skipping cutscenes and other enemies, shaving about 2 minutes off the time. So be on the lookout for more faster speedruns.
That's huge.
More faster. Yeah.
That is a huge time save in terms of speedrunning. 2 minutes is colossal.
Yeah. People get stoked when you shave 2 seconds off of something, and if you can shave 2 whole minutes, it's like, oh, cool. My life's work is now over.
The speedrunning scene for the game has opened back up.
Yes.
They've checked the glitch, and it is replicatable. I think now the test is whether it can be used in other areas, or if it's just that one door.
Yeah, that would be... I mean, if you're able to just cut through more doors, you'll be able to save many more minutes off. That's an interesting way to do it, too, because it looked like it was... If you watch the video of it, it's a very interesting thing. You just back up against the wall fighting your way, and then you just clip through. And, like, the enemies just shove you in. And I was like, oh, that's useful. It's a good game save.
It's fun that how people can always find a new glitch in old games.
Yeah, it really is remarkable. I think that, and it's almost exclusively kind of because in the speedrunning community, so many people are just playing one game over and over and over, trying to get the best time, and they're combing through every little bit of the game. And if you can find really minuscule glitches that haven't been seen, it's really crazy. I mean, it reminds me of that. I think it was the Batman Arkham City thing. Where there was like 10 years after release or whatever, it actually found one of the secrets where you had to change, like Calendar Man, who was in the basement, you had to change your internal PS4 clock to a specific date, and then he would unlock, and then he would give you, it's like, oh, so you showed up on this day of all days, and have a really specific line that he would say in regards to that date and its relation to the company. I thought that was... I love secrets like that. Little bitty hidden gems make games just that much better. In other streaming news, an Apex Legends streamer just did a 54-hour stream to climb to the top of the charts in Apex Legends. So that's all you need to know. If you want to be at the top spot in Apex Legends, you just got to spend 55 hours to beat this guy.
Or do it faster and
or do
get
it
a better
faster.
record.
I think I can do 48 hours, but 54 is a little bit too much for me, even.
I can't do 16 hours awake.
Yeah, no, I can't. I get burnt out after a couple hours. I'm just like, I mean, it's fun, but I'm just like, ugh. I need a break. I need a minute or like an hour to do something. Or an hour to do something less.
I'm just that kind of person who rushed the game to be finished whenever new games come into my collection. Just can't help.
Well,
alrighty, but
we're kind of sounding like old people now.
Yeah, it's fine. But
so let's hand it over to some actual old people. And let them talk about how it was back in 1900.
Or,
when paper was a thing.
2000. At least pre-iPod. Pre-iPod Apple era. It's not that... I mean, which is still mind-blowing. But
no, yeah, it was the 90s.
Yeah.
Some of us were
here it
alive.
is. Barely. But this week, let's throw it over to Alex and Jeff Green to hear them reminisce and talk about some game journalism in life.
And we're back, and we're here with my former boss, Jeff Green. Jeff, how are you doing?
I am well. How are you, Alex?
I am great, and I'm excited to talk about the early magazine history that we share. But before even we shared a magazine, you were at Mac Week.
Yes, that was my first magazine gig. It was a now defunct weekly Macintosh business magazine. And it was about as exciting as that sounds.
It's amazing that the market could support a weekly published piece of paper about Macintosh news.
And that was like pre iPod even,
Yes.
let alone iPhone. I mean, that was actually kind of the dark days of Apple. It was just post Next, I think, post the Jobs' Next box, and I don't think anybody knew what was really going to happen with Apple's future at that point. In fact, I should have bought stock back then.
Right? How'd you get the job?
I got the job because I was at a book publishing place run by Ziff Davis, our former boss. So in the late 80s, early 90s, computer books were like a thing back then. People would buy books on DBase and Lotus 123. I don't know if your listeners even know, that might not sound like English to them. But yeah, these were just old software programs. And there used to be like paper books, like 600-page books on how to run these things. That was my first gig out of college, was at Cybex Computer Books. And then Ziff Davis came into town. Ziff Davis is the big corporation that owned all the gaming magazines that everybody knows, but also PC Magazine, PC Computing, all sorts of computer magazines, and they decided to start up a book division in the Bay Area, and they poached a bunch of us from Cybex Computer Books. So that was my intro to Ziff Davis, was the book division, but I couldn't stand it. I hated working on those books, and I was really excited about getting into the magazine biz, and a listing went up for an internal listing for Mac Week. So I went there thinking that being on a Macintosh weekly would be more exciting than working on books. And comparatively, it was.
Reporting on SCSI drives and scanners?
Yeah, my beat was the modem and routers beat.
Whoa!
Yeah. Occasionally, I would get into exciting things like laser printer reviews, things like that. It was pretty soul deadening, and it wasn't for me. But it was, I learned a hell of a lot. I learned a lot about the magazine business. I learned about how to make a weekly deadline. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
As soon as you turned in your weekly stories, you really had to get to work on the next week.
How did you get over to CGW?
That was actually the exact same process. There was the internal job listings. And, I wasn't at Mac Week for that long before I realized it was just really not for me. I mean, to be on a weekly magazine about that kind of stuff, you had to be passionate about it. Mm-hmm. And like my coworkers on that magazine, like that's what they were into. They were into talking about like Mac routers, and I totally was not. And after hours at work there, we would be playing things like Marathon, which was, Bungie's early LAN game. And I was playing games on my own, and had been before I was ever at Mac Week. But I never thought I could have a career in gaming. That just seemed like something else that like the cooler people got to do, or the luckier people. I never even imagined it was possible that I could do that. But I used to read all the magazines. I read Next Generation back then, when Neil West ran it, and Computer Gaming World, and EGM, and I used to be so mad when I would read it, thinking like, how did these? I don't know if we're allowed to curse on your podcast.
Well, people have. The EGM guys
how did these bastards get to work on such a cool magazine? And then a listing went up for Computer Gaming World, and it was a pay cut, and it was a lower position than where I was at the time at Mac Week, and I totally didn't even hesitate. I like jumped on it, and my boss at Mac Week was like pissed that I did that, and because he thought I was like throwing my career away, and in fact basically said as much to me when I was in his office quitting. He was like, do you have any idea what you're giving up here? Like, You know, and it's like, yeah, I totally do, dude. Like maybe this is your whole world, but it ain't mine. You know, and I never looked back. I mean, and I didn't regret it for a day.
Yeah, and eventually you became the editor-in-chief.
Yeah, that was just mostly a process of attrition. You know, I stayed longer than everybody else.
Yeah, but I mean, along the way, like Ziff Davis launched Ziff Davis TV and things. I remember they sent you over for an audition over there, didn't they?
They did. God, your memory is really good, Alex. That's frightening. Yeah, they sent me over there. At the time, they were launching like Tech TV. I think Adam Sessler, you know, was working there at the time, or he got the gig, and Kate Botello and some other cool people, and they brought me over to audition, and I remember them just like being aghast at how old I was, and somebody even made me read this copy, and it was like really like, "Hey kids," you know, and I tried my best to do it, but I remember hearing. I either heard it directly in my ears or I heard it secondhand that they were like, "This is so pathetic that this old guy is here." So I didn't get the gig, but you and I were talking about this before we hit record, that what seemed like old at the time, like now I can't believe it, you know, because I did really feel old back then. I think it's sort of a career hazard of being in gaming, is that it's a young person's industry, right? By definition, or it's a young person's pursuit for the most part. I think it's changing. I think as gamers are aging now, as the gaming generation is getting older, maybe that perception is changing. But certainly back in the 90s and early 2000s, like, you know, responsible adults were not in the gaming industry.
We were certainly not responsible. No.
And no, we were not. Even
that's
his boss was not.
One of the things I said to Crispin was that actually they had gotten in trouble in Illinois for running over somebody in the office on a scooter.
Right.
Didn't we do that too?
We ran around in scooters. We did. I mean, it was really like it was like paid kindergarten to some extent. I mean, there was no adult supervision. There were no adults in the building. I was not. I mean, maybe the publishers, maybe like Dale and some of those guys. The people on the other side were a little more responsible, but we certainly weren't. I mean, it was kind of, looking back, it was pretty great, right? I mean, it was pretty fun to go to work and just be playing games. And I mean, to be clear, we didn't just play games all day. That's a huge misconception about anybody who works in the gaming industry, right? I mean, of course we play games, that is part of our job, but everybody also has a job they actually really have to do.
Yeah.
And ours was to write a magazine.
Absolutely, and that's a publishing gig. It's a lot of work, but like the death matches after 5 p.m.
Oh my God. And, you know, to be honest, sometimes it was like after 3 p.m. or after 2 p.m. It would depend where we were on the deadline schedule.
But honestly, I think one of the greatest things about the later CGW issues and after the Johnny Wilson eras, I'm sorry, is your column Greenspeak, and people would be upset if I didn't mention it. Can you tell me some of your favorite memories of Greenspeak?
Well, certainly getting to write it was a huge, amazing memory for me, and it was really a career milestone. I still consider a career milestone to have been able to get that. You know, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to have a column, and then to actually have the back page column in a big magazine like that. I mean, obviously, this was not the New Yorker or Esquire or whatever, but in our world, CGW was pretty big. And I sort of had to earn my way into that column. Like, I don't know if you remember this, but the first few columns I wrote were not in the magazine itself. They were on the CD that came with the magazine because they didn't yet fully believe I could do it, or I hadn't earned the right yet. I hadn't been there long enough. But the CD column was popular enough, ridiculously, that they eventually gave me the back page. And I think just the freedom to be able to write about whatever I wanted to write about and have sort of no filter was like such an amazing. It just felt really good creatively, that every month I could write whatever I wanted to, and they basically would publish it. Just felt great. And what I really liked about the column mostly was I sort of had a mission, and the mission was, it was a self-imposed mission, which was basically, and it's not genius, but I just wanted to be entertaining. I wanted it to be funny, and I wanted to end the issue off in a fun way. The guy who had the column before me, Martin Cerullis, who was a very brilliant guy and a smart writer, and no offense to him or whatever, but like his column was called "What's the Deal?" and I have fond memories of that column too. So by no means do I mean to insult him in any way, but the nature of his column, "What's the Deal?" meant that he was complaining every month. It was like, "What's the deal with online gamers?" And it would be like a 900-page rant on what idiots people were online or whatever. And it wasn't devoid of humor, but it was always a rant. That's what it was. He ended the issue with a rant. And I felt like, I actually wanted to be like a little more fun than that. And my biggest goal, and the thing that made me the happiest, is if people who were not gamers liked the column. Then I felt like I really succeeded. If I could just write something that would make anybody laugh or whatever, I felt like I did my job.
I think you definitely did your job there. I think the other thing to sort of point out is, like Jack Benny, the old-timey radio, let's old guys talk here. Old-timey radio doesn't necessarily hold up, but Jack Benny holds up because Jack Benny made fun of himself.
Right.
And, yeah.
I did that a lot. And and actually, now that you say that, that was really my other goal with the column, was to show that gamers and gaming didn't have to just all be like, toxic, like male one-upmanship and just like, there was just a whole lot of like, I'm the greatest gamer kind of stuff at all time. And I felt like I couldn't relate to that attitude at all. Like, I'm a gamer, but like I've never been like that great at a lot of games that I love, but I play them anyway. But like, I will readily admit that I suck at certain things. And like, that was an attitude I felt like never got expressed in the magazines. It was always just like how awesome we were. So I wanted to get that feeling across too. And so I wrote a lot of columns about what it was like to be like the worst gamer in the building. And I think that resonated with other people who don't like to admit it out loud, but who know that they're not the greatest.
I think that was also indicative of the transition of the period, right? It was going from people who'd grown up, being the fastest, twitchiest in town, transitioning to the next generation of fastest, twitchiest, to the first-person shooters.
Actually, that's a great point, because those of us who were on the magazine at that transition point, that's right. When Doom and Quake and all those games started coming up, like CGW had been around for so long and was really kind of more, especially in the early days, more centric around strategy games and war games and RPGs, all of which were turn-based in those days, that the rise of the shooters kind of took CGW aback. Like, they didn't know how to handle it at first, the old guard, and that's directly contributed to the rise and eventual domination of PC Gamer, our competition. They basically won that war because they were just frankly more with it. We were turning down covers from id that they were taking. There's a few notorious examples, like we put Wing Commander 4 on the cover because we passed up Quake 2. It's that kind of thing.
We don't have to go into how much we all hate PC Gamer, like we hate the Yankees or we hate the
we
the
don't
Seahawks
hate
or somebody.
PC Gamer.
No, we don't. We're wonderful people, but competitively,
they were the enemy.
They were the enemy. I wanted to transition here though, because you made the transition to the other side of the industry for a while. I'm wondering what that experience was like for you, making that jump after covering it for so long.
Yeah, it kind of sucked.
Well, that's what we always say about the developing. Developing sucks. It's hard.
Right. It was hard. It was hard to work on the same thing day after day after day after day after day, especially if it wasn't like a game that you were like really that into. I didn't really understand that until I was in the middle of doing it. I went to EA is where I went, and I went to the Sims team. And the first thing I learned joining the Sims team is that there was a hierarchy in the Sims team. Like, you don't immediately go to that team and get to work on The Sims or Sim City. You have to start on things like Sim Animals, which was the first game I worked on. You have to start at the lower tier. So I was working on like Sims games for the Wii at the time is what I got stuck with. And Sim Animals No offense to anyone who might be listening, whoever worked on Sim Animals. It wasn't the greatest game, and we all knew that. And even the management knew it. They knew it wasn't going to be great, and they weren't going to budget any more than they had already budgeted. And they were like, we're going to be fine if it comes out with a 70. You guys just finish the game. And so you would go in day after day after day, knowing you were working on a mediocre game, knowing no one was going to buy it. And you had to do that because that was your job. And it didn't change after a few weeks, like working on a magazine. It wasn't like we got to start over every 4 weeks, right? If we put out an issue that was not our best issue, well, we started fresh the next month. When you're working on a video game, you're working on it every day for years.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky and you're working on something awesome, then maybe going to work is super fun every day. But if you're working on something that nobody gives a shit about, that's sort of a different story.
But that's sort of one of the things we try to communicate at the museum is, even the game that you didn't like, somebody worked very hard on that, and it wasn't necessarily a fun process for them.
That's right. It wasn't necessarily a fun process. And the other thing that I learned, I have to say, is that, working on games that weren't like that great is what I learned, having come from the criticism side, is that everybody on the team basically knows it, and they're trying their hardest to make it as good as they can. Mm-hmm. And also, a lot of the things that would get complained about in reviews, like, well, why didn't they do this? The team totally thought about that. Like, you didn't think of something that they didn't. They're not any dumber than you are. Like, they all knew that, like, maybe the UI wasn't as good as it should be, and they would like to do this, that, or the other thing, but they didn't have the time, or they didn't have the budget, or in order to do that, they were going to have to rip out some other part of the game that they didn't have time for. So everybody's effort is always super sincere, even on the games that end up not getting good Metacritic scores. At least what I've seen throughout my career is that what you said is exactly right. Everybody is trying their hardest to make the best game they possibly can. Nobody sets out to make a shitty video game,
Right. I think we should frame what you just said and put it on the wall when people come into the museum. That is like the most important thing I think a lot of fans need to hear.
Yeah, right. I mean, Matt, just put yourself in that exact place. That's all anybody really has to do. You're going to do the best job you can.
But you now, what are you up to now?
Well, now I'm still not, I'm still away from the press, but this is the closest job I've had to being in the magazines. Now I'm a full-time consultant. I have my own business with two former CGW guys who Robert Coffey and Ryan Scott. The three of us formed a company called MinMax. We are at min-max.net. And we hire ourselves out to game companies to look at the games that are in development and advise them before they come out. Sometimes that involves doing mock reviews. In other words, we're going to review it as if we were still critics and tell you what you're going to get. And this is probably what you can expect from the real critics. But what we really prefer to do is come in before it gets to that stage, like while the games are still in alpha or even pre-alpha, and sort of help guide some of their decision making as they're developing the game. Like give them early feedback on UI, on combat systems, on dialogue systems, on plot, on whatever, on graphics, and sort of help them see what they often can't see because they're so close to the project. Or often what we're doing is we're mediating. There might be a dispute between the developers and the publishers, or just sort of some conflict over like they think it's awesome, but the publishers think it sucks. So they get a third party to kind of come in and weigh in on it. We won't really know that when we come in. Like, we're not told that there's an issue, but we'll come in and they'll say, okay, play the game all day and then give us your feedback. And then inevitably we'll say something like, this was great, but the UI was just really awful. And then somebody will go, "See, we told you."
That's exactly like the business consulting in the real world. It's just a lot more fun.
Yes, that is what consultants do in any business, and yeah, that's what we are. And it's a good gig. And I think the most fun for us is that when we were in the journalism side, and we would go to a company and they would be showing us a game. Then it was all like, not all, but a lot of times there was a lot of smoke and mirrors. It was like, let's show them the best possible version of whatever it is, Tomb Raider, so they prepare everything for the press ahead of time. Now in our current job, we go in there and they're like, okay, here's everything that's broken, help. So we're getting like an honest look and a real look at the games in this raw state that they're in. And it's really fascinating. Like, it's fascinating to see games from the very beginning when they're like not looking that promising. And in many cases, some of the games we've looked at are games that everyone listening here has played, and they turn out awesome, and we're so excited. And like, we're not necessarily taking any credit for it. It's just fun to watch the process.
No, you've become part of the team, basically.
In a way, we definitely humble ourselves and say, like, all we're really doing is helping them think, like we don't ever suggest any act. Like, what I would never do is say, your combat isn't working, I think you should do this. It's more like we'll say, we think you should do something like this. It's a subtle difference. It's basically sort of saying, like, why don't you guys think about these 5 things, as opposed to, I'm going to tell you 5 things you should put in your game, because we're not making the game. They are.
Certainly. It's like an absurd amount of experience between the 3 of you guys. It's like 60 years of experience and over that.
Yeah, it's a lot. And, and also we hire a lot of people, by the way, as freelancers and as contractors, because we are also aware that we are 3 older white guys, and especially these days, we want to make sure that we're able to provide a diverse point of view for anybody making games. In some cases, that's a huge part of the deal, right? Is some group of people, is some character being portrayed in a good way? So we try to offer whatever we can demographically that makes sense.
Excellent. Well, Jeff Green, thank you so much for appearing on the podcast, and good luck going forward.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure to talk to you and see you after all these many, many years.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
And we're back. All right.
Whoa. Whoa. Okay, everybody, we're back now. Welcome back to the Midcast. We got a great show. We just had a great show, a great interview for you.
I apologize for that outburst. I will try and make sure that he never comes out again. But we will like to extend a thank you for Jeff Green and Alex for that great interview. So now that we were talking about kind of like the older era of like Apple and iPad, or iPod rather, what have y'all been playing?
Great segue. Good job.
Oh, yeah.
I have been playing, speaking about sort of slightly older games and older formats, they talked about Doom and Quake and stuff for a minute.
Yeah.
I have been playing the beta for Splitgate, which is a upcoming first-person shooter, arena shooter, that is essentially Halo meets Portal. And I have got to say, it is really fun. It is exactly how you remember Halo deathmatches going. It is extremely hectic, fast-paced. It feels like a Quake or a Doom. What's
the title of this again?
Splitgate.
Splitgate. Okay.
That's a cool name.
I like the name, but I also like the Portal Halo combo. I like being able to jump through portals and sneak behind somebody. Or
is it for PvP only?
It's PvP only, yeah. But it's extremely quick. You can get into and out of a lobby in like seconds. I've never really been disappointed in a round. Like, you win and you lose, but it's always entertaining to play. It's not like, I feel really bad because I'm not doing anything. It's like, no, that's just the game. You're running around, you're getting shot, you're shooting.
Awesome.
The time to kill is pretty slow. It's Halo-y. It's not like a Rainbow Six where you just get shot once and you're dead.
Okay.
And it is just it's good fun. It's not groundbreaking, but it's very entertaining.
That's very important for, like, I think that's where a lot of games that try and take themselves too seriously, they forget the fun aspect of it. Like, where you just want to enjoy playing the game. You don't necessarily need to yeah, you don't necessarily need to just make it specifically mechanic based and like super serious. There needs to be an element of fun because video games are supposed to be fun, right?
No.
Right?
No, I don't know what games you're playing, man.
I think it's more difficult to make games that are fun for all people instead of just fun for you, but not the people you're beating out of.
That's a very fair point.
Yeah, that kind of remind me.
I mean, it's
a while ago when Stasis come into Destiny 2, people all are yelling in the Crucible that they think freezing your enemy is so much fun, but being frozen, it's not fun at all.
Yes, very true. It's like being frozen is not fun, but freezing other people is fun. I mean, it's a give and take of the game. I mean, it's
very difficult to take a balance of it. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's like going back to the old game. It's very fun to noob tube people in Modern Warfare, but then when you get blasted with the noob tube, then you're just pissed off. It's like it's a give and take. As long as you're using the item that gives you an edge, then it's good. But as soon as somebody else uses it, they're the worst player and a cheater. Only I get to use it. Just me. It's illegal for you. I need the help. I need it to win.
I'm bad at the game.
Yeah. In a little other news, I do want to mention that I've been playing Pokemon Unite a little bit. As a person who is not very deep into MOBAs, this one is very fun, and I think they do a pretty good job of having it be fair base of entry for everybody. And like their ranking system with, as you level up, you play with people that are of similar strength or similar experience of the game, so it makes it makes it pretty balanced. It's also very short matches, so it's not like you're going to be locked in a match for 30 minutes, 40 minutes. It's a strict 10-minute limit, and they also have shorter 5-minute matches. I think it's the flow is really well, and the use of the Pokemon as your character and like playing ability, I really, really like it. And getting to see them evolve as the match goes on is really fun too. I recommend it if you're in there for like a base level ease of entry MOBA and you like Pokemon. I recommend it. But I think it's about time that we wrap this puppy up for today, but we will see you next week. We want to thank you for listening to the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment's official podcast. If you have any thoughts, questions, corrections, or general museum ideas, please shoot us an email at info@themade.org.
we would like to send out a big thank you to everyone who donated recently and to our Patreon supporters who keep the Made afloat. Patreon donors get to listen to the podcast 1 week before it's released on major streaming services. And we will continue that with future episodes every week. Till then, I'm Chun.
I'm Miles.
I'm Red.
And I'm Anthony. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
Later, gamers!